The rulebook of human health? Yeah, it's being completely rewritten right now, and I am absolutely thrilled you're here to explore it with me today. We're diving deep into a massive systemic overhaul happening over at Stanford University, where they are entirely reimagining how we train the doctors of tomorrow. Because look, Stanford isn't just bolting a couple of shiny new tech classes onto an old syllabus. No, they are building a completely new blueprint for medical education from the ground up.
So, I want you to picture this for a second. You're sitting in a clinic waiting for your test results. Your doctor walks in, but they aren't the only one analyzing your chart. They are actually working in tandem with an artificial intelligence system that has instantly cross-referenced millions of data points to suggest a diagnosis. It begs the question, what happens when our future doctors rely on AI for patient care? Does it make them superhuman healers or dangerously dependent on algorithms?
Okay, let's dive into this explainer, because the stakes literally could not be higher. According to leaders in the medical education community, generative AI has the capacity to be as transformational as computers and the internet were for previous generations. We are talking about the single biggest shift in the practice of medicine since the discovery of antibiotics. And honestly, if we don't train medical students how to navigate this properly, the consequences could be disastrous.
So, here's our roadmap. First, we'll cover the AI medical imperative. Second, we'll look at Stanford's curriculum shift. Third, how they're transforming student assessment. And finally, we'll tackle the deskilling and ethical risks. Let's kick things off with Section 1, the AI medical imperative. This is a true paradigm shift.
Why is this shift happening so fast? Well, it's because AI tools, things like ambient scribes, diagnostic imaging aids, sepsis prediction models, they're already operating in hospitals right now. Without formal training, physicians develop these dangerous ad hoc habits. They either blindly trust the machine or they entirely reject it out of fear. Both of those extremes put patients at serious risk. You know, traditional medical education was all about rote memorization, right? Cramming isolated data points like the intricacies of the Krebs cycle into a student's brain. But the AI-era model, it demands something totally different. We're talking computational literacy, the ability to critically appraise data, and mastering human-AI collaboration. The focus is shifting away from just memorizing biological pathways to skillfully managing these incredibly powerful computational tools.
Which brings us to Section 2. Stanford's AI curriculum shift, specifically their massive 2025 overhaul. To tackle this head-on, starting in the fall of 2025, Stanford Medicine is rolling out a foundational curriculum revamp for all its medical and physician assistant students. Spearheaded by visionaries like Dr. Rena Thomas and Dr. Jonathan Chen, they've built this artificial intelligence in clinical practice framework. It's brilliantly designed as a modular, evidence-informed roadmap that integrates directly into the existing undergrad medical education. They aren't trying to turn doctors into computer scientists here, they're just building practical clinical competency through really clearly defined learning objectives. Stanford actually breaks this down into 4 core steps. Step 1 is mechanistic understanding. Students have to learn the basic nuts and bolts of how machine learning functions so they can pierce that black box. Step 2 is clinical practice integration, getting hands-on with secure AI tools in real workflows. Step 3 covers the ethical and legal implications, like recognizing algorithmic bias and fiercely protecting patient privacy. And Step 4 is critical appraisal. This is crucial. It's about using statistical methods to validate an AI's output so doctors don't just blindly follow automated advice. Now, there's a brilliant metaphor used by Stanford educators that perfectly captures this shift, the physiology of AI. Think about it. Just as a physician must deeply understand renal physiology to safely treat kidney disease, they now fundamentally must understand the mechanics of machine learning to safely prescribe treatments based on an AI's diagnosis. Foundational AI literacy is no longer optional. It is a non-negotiable physiological system of modern medicine. To coordinate a transformation of this magnitude, Stanford has mobilized an impressive institutional architecture. You've got the Amy Center handling research, translation, and technical skills. Then there's Ray's Health, acting as the ethical compass, setting safety standards and ensuring equitable deployment. And meanwhile, Stanford EdTech is actively building the actual digital pedagogy and simulation tools that students will use every single day.
All right, moving on to Section 3, transforming student assessment and the wild new tools making it happen.
So here's a brain teaser. How do you assess a student's medical competency when ChatGPT can easily pass the medical board exams? Well, you use platforms like Clinical Mind AI. Historically, med students practice interviewing on human actors. They call them standardized patients, but that is incredibly expensive and super hard to scale. Clinical Mind AI uses virtual patients instead. It gives students immediate, literally limitless practice, allowing them to test their diagnostic reasoning and interview skills in a low-stakes environment way earlier in their education than we've ever seen before.
Now, what's really fascinating about this next tool is that AI is actually being used to coach the clinical reasoning process itself. The AI Clinical Coach, or AI Click, actually listens in as a medical resident verbally presents a patient case to their supervising physician. The AI then generates a rubric-based report that evaluates the trainee's thought process. It helps the attending physician provide highly specific, meaningful coaching to foster real critical thinking habits on the fly.
Furthermore, AI is swooping in to solve one of the biggest resource bottlenecks in all of medical education: grading. Look, evaluating complex, open-ended clinical notes takes faculty an absurd amount of time. But tools utilizing GPT-4o like PN Grader can automate the assessment of these written clinical summaries. This is a huge win. It doesn't just reduce faculty burnout, it provides immediate, incredibly detailed, formative feedback to massive cohorts of students, making sure they are hitting the mark on factual accuracy and completeness. But we do need to talk about Section 4, de-skilling and ethical risks, the dark side of AI. As amazing as these advancements are, Stanford's researchers are waving some major red flags. Rushing this integration without strict guardrails could cause the very foundation of medical expertise to crumble. One of the absolute biggest threats is something researchers call the hallucination reinforcement loop. Imagine this: an AI generates a plausible-sounding but entirely fake medical fact, a hallucination. A medical student unknowingly absorbs this misinformation as truth. That student then carries this false fact into their clinical practice, or worse, uses it to prompt future AI tools, reinforcing the error across the entire system. It's a dangerous cycle. And that leads directly to the de-skilling dilemma. Clinical reasoning requires rigorous, repeated practice. If students just outsource all their pattern recognition to an algorithm early on, they totally hinder the development of their own independent expertise. Think about it. If the hospital network goes down or they're at a patient's bedside without a device, their functional competency just drops to zero. This kind of over-reliance risks severe automation complacency. Which brings us to the very core of what medicine actually is. Let this quote from the source material really sink in for a second. When a frightened parent asks, "Is my child going to be okay?" no algorithm can reliably interpret fear or respond with compassion. Machines are incredible at optimizing data, for sure, but they absolutely cannot replicate human empathy, emotional nuance, or moral judgment. And that highlights the ultimate goal of Stanford's entire ecosystem: the human-centered doctor. The grand irony of integrating all this AI into medicine is that as the machines take over the heavy cognitive load of data processing and differential diagnosis, human doctors actually have to double down on their soft skills. The focus shifts entirely to empathy, emotional self-awareness, and building genuine trust. The goal here is augmenting humans, not replacing them. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. If we really are entering an era where algorithms reliably handle the complex data analysis and the diagnosis, will the future of medical mastery be defined not by what doctors know, but by how they connect with us in our most vulnerable moments? It's a fascinating, delicate balance between machine efficiency and human empathy, and how we navigate it is going to define the future of our health. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the future.